Hello, and welcome back to another episode of General Conference Conversations, the podcast where we have conversations about General Conference. I'm your host, Kaylin, and I'm super excited about this talk. So excited, you have no idea. We are talking about seeing God's family through the overview lens by Sister Runia. Runia? She's the first counselor in the Young Women's General Presidency, and I just loved this talk. I remember it sort of. I was traveling, I think I've said this before, I was traveling on Saturday of General Conference. So I was flying on an airplane during the morning and afternoon sessions, and then we just barely got to where we were staying for the evening session. And so we were eating dinner, and so it's all kind of a blur. But I do remember this vaguely, and I remember really loving it then too. So I'm excited to talk about it today. Of course, it's my pet project, my pet topic that I absolutely love to talk about is love, God's love, our love for others. So as always, I encourage you to read this, and definitely read it or watch it or listen to it on your own before you come and listen to me talk about it, so you can get your own inspirations and all of that goodness and see what jumps out at you, and you can listen to me about what jumps out at me. A lot jumped out at me, so much jumped out at me, so I'm gonna try and get all of my thoughts in order and in an orderly fashion talk about this talk. So she starts by telling a story, as talks often start with, right? She talks about when her youngest daughter was little, she started using reading glasses. And she was reading a book with her youngest daughter. And she looked at her daughter, she was looking at the book, she looked at her daughter, and she thought, man, she's so big, where's the time gone? She lifted up her reading glasses and she realized, oh wait, she's not bigger, it's just the glasses. And she used that as an analogy, as a metaphor for when we're seeing things only up close, we tend to miss things. And so she talks about, her whole talk is about zooming out and looking at it with an eternal lens, looking at our life, the lives of others, other people, all of this stuff, right? And she talks about people trying to get into space. And at first, the rockets had no windows. But when the Apollo 8 mission went to the moon, the astronauts had one. And they were so struck by seeing the Earth from so far away. And they gave this sensation of viewing everything from a new vantage point that changes everything. They call it the overview effect. And basically that it shrinks everything down so small that it feels manageable. I remember this random memory that just popped into my head when I was little. I don't know, I was probably 8 or 9 maybe. I was living in Colorado at the time, and we had this thing where I lived. It's the Hot Air Balloon Festival. And I think we went every year. And it was just kind of what it sounds like, right? It was just a big field with a bunch of hot air balloons. I don't know if hot air balloons have just gone out of style, but man, they are cool. They should every city should have a hot air balloon festival. It's so much fun. So it's kind of just a way for everybody to show off their hot air balloons, I guess. And a lot of people would sponsor. My dad, his company sponsored one, and so we would go and look at them, and I got to ride in one. They would do the festival. I can't remember exactly everything that happened because I was so little, but they would blow it all up, and they'd have them tied to the ground to go up, float up, come back down, float, come back down. But then they would actually do a fly, they would fly them, and they would go and land somewhere else, and somebody would pick them up. And I got to ride a hot air balloon, and it was terrifying and exhilarating. I don't know if I'd do it again. Honestly, I think I would, but like it was, I don't know how they convinced me to go on a hot air balloon ride when I was 8 because I was a scaredy cat child, but I did it. And obviously it was not as far away from the earth as these people were, but looking down, you know, the cars look like toys and the people look like ants, right? Like it does give you a different perspective of the world. Just literally backing up and seeing, what's the phrase, like what's the term or the phrase, seeing the forest for the trees, right? Like when you're focused in so closely, sometimes you can't see other things, right? And this is why people go to therapy. This is why it's so helpful to have somebody who's not a part of your life, who isn't focused, right? Like it can be cathartic to talk to your spouse or a best friend or a parent or a sibling, right, about things that are going on in your life, but they also have a very narrow view of your life. And so when you talk to an outside source, third party who does not have any stakes in your life, it's easier for them to see and comment and be like, but what about this? And you'd be like, yeah, like they have that overview, right, of your life, sort of. Anyway, so she talks about, and she uses this, of course, as an analogy for the gospel, and that as humans we have an earthbound point of view of the world, but God has an overview of the universe, and he sees it all. He sees the beginning, the middle, and the end. He sees everything, and sometimes it can feel really impossible for us to feel that because we're only seeing the now. We're only seeing the moment that we're living in, and how can we possibly ever get out of it, right? But she talks about how through the eye of faith, we can zoom out and view ourselves and our families with hope and joy. And that as we focus on the Savior, we can have that specifically. She talks about going through a rough patch her senior year of high school, and she wasn't making great decisions, and her mom was really worried. Her mom cried. She wondered if she disappointed her, and she also wondered that if her worry meant that she had lost hope. And her dad kind of reacted in a different way. He was kind of able to back up and see his role in her life as something different. He was a great cheerleader for her all the way through high school and going to BYU and all of that stuff. And she talks about Lehi's dream, that her dad was really good at doing what Lehi did, was staying at the tree, continuing to partake of the fruit, and calling those he loved to the tree. Never chasing after them, but trying to beckon them closer, right? I liked this analogy. At first I was like, I don't know if I love this. But I liked this because it takes into, and I like this whole talk because of this, and I'll get into more of this as we go along, but she talks about this in a way that is very aware of everybody's agency, right? We do what we can. And when we have to accept the actions of others, right? We can invite, we can love, we can testify, we can share our testimony, right? But we are not in charge of them accepting it and changing because of it, right? That's not our job. Our job is to love and to do our best. And so I liked this analogy because of that, of like, our job, what we're trying to do is trying to keep ourselves on the straight and narrow path. We're trying to hold on to the iron rod. We're trying to stay at the tree. And we are trying to get others to come and partake of this beautiful thing that we love, right? To feel God's love for them. But at the end of the day, it is their choice. And she says a little bit later too, and I think it's in one of the quotes I'm going to read. But anyway, she shares another story kind of along the same line. She talks about after Elder Neil A. Maxwell died, there was a reporter who asked his son what he'd missed most about his dad. And his son said that he'd missed dinners at his parents' house because he always left feeling like his dad believed in him. And she said this was around the time that her children were adults and were married and had kids and were coming home for Sunday dinners. And she said she found herself making lists of things that she could kind of remind them of, like help around the house more, or don't forget to be a good listener. And when she read that comment that Elder Maxwell's son had said, she threw away the list and tried to silence the critical voice and focused on the positive things they were already doing. And her son passed away a few years later, and she remembered being very grateful that she had done that, because their time together had been happier and more positive, because she didn't worry that he knew that she loved him, or that she was proud of him or anything, because she had taken the time to focus on the positives. And there's this kind of a longer quote, but I think it's really good. She says, before we interact with a loved one, can we ask ourselves the question, is what I'm about to do or say helpful or hurtful? Our words are one of our superpowers, and family members are like human blackboards standing in front of us saying, write what you think of me. These messages, whether intentional or unintentional, should be hopeful and encouraging. Our job is not to teach someone who's going through a rough patch they are bad or disappointing. On rare occasions, we may feel prompted to correct, but most often, let's tell our loved ones in spoken and unspoken ways the messages they long to hear. Our family feels whole and complete because you are in it. You will be loved for the rest of your life, no matter what. And I think it's easy for us to be critical, right? To point out things that we could do better. And I think there's times for that, right? There's times to say, hey, maybe do a little bit better on this, maybe whatever. But I think we all know people who give advice whether it's asked for or not, right? I know people who are just constantly giving advice, constantly correcting people, and not even in like a critical way, right? It's not like you did this wrong and show change. It's just like, this is my experience with this thing. And for me personally, that's hard because I'm a people pleaser. And so even if that person has no intention of like making me feel bad for making a different choice than they did, I feel bad for making a better choice, because I think that they expect me to make the choice that they did, right? Or to take their experience and like make my choices based off of it, right? And I'm very much a kind of person who needs to experience something for myself. Anyway, it's a whole other conversation, but I think we all know people like that, right? Who are just constantly spouting advice, and it can get overwhelming, right? It can get very, very overwhelming very, very quickly. And it's nice, right, when you ask for advice and somebody says, oh yeah, well, this is what I would do, or this is what I think you should do, when you ask for it. And yet when it just comes without a prompting, it feels like criticizing, right? It feels like you've done something wrong. And so I love this story that she was pointing out the good things they were doing. This is something that I'm so passionate about, is like seeing what you're already doing well. So many times, so many different things in life are focused on what we could be doing better, which is great, like constant improving, constant improvement, constant learning, constant change is good, right? We're trying to be better. And yet that can get really overwhelming for people, especially when it feels like you don't have anything left to give. You don't have any energy left. You don't have anything left to do, right? To be reminded like, hey, I think you're actually doing a really great job. And I remember, and that's not always enough, right? Like, it's great to be told, hey, you're doing a great job. But it can mean everything. I remember when I was a missionary, it was like a transfer to into COVID, and I was training another missionary, and I love her to death, absolutely to death. She was a firecracker, and she just had, right out of the MTC fire, and I felt so bad that she came out into the mission field just as COVID was starting. She was one of the last groups out of the MTC when COVID started. And so she just had a fire lit under her, and she wanted to do everything at once. And I had to kind of manage her expectations as to what missionary life was going to look like for the moment, because I wasn't sure what missionary life was going to look like during COVID. We didn't have any idea what we were doing. Anyway, a couple transfers in, we had a zone conference, and the zone leaders gave this very passionate training talk, whatever discussion you want to call it, and it left me feeling terrible. I was so dead. My anxiety was so frayed. My mental state was just gone. I think I had like 4 months left, and I just wanted to go home. I just didn't feel like there was anything I could left that I could do. And it was just like, you need to be better. You need to be doing more. You need to be better, and like all this stuff. And my companion found it very, very helpful. She was like, yeah, I'm hyped. I needed that call out. That was just like how her brain worked. And I was just like, that was dumb. Like, I feel so terrible. Do they not know what we're doing? Do they not see how much we're trying? We actually got a call from the zone leaders that night, or a couple nights later. I don't remember. And they were like, what did you feel? How did you feel? We've had some less than stellar reviews, basically, of our training in zone conference. And I wasn't fully truthful, mostly because I was like, I don't really care, like, whatever. And I remember them saying, sisters, we hope you know that you're doing a good job, and we think you're doing a good job, and you're doing good, like, you're great. And it wasn't until that moment that I realized that's what I needed to hear, right? Like, okay, they think I'm doing good. And I tell this story, and I've told this story on here before, and I cry every time I think about it or tell it, because it's just such a pure, lovely story that I have for my mission. There are these two zone leaders. Sorry, it wasn't the zone leaders who gave that training, it was the APs. Anyway, that's not important, but there you go. Our zone leaders were such sweethearts. And it was during COVID, and so we didn't have contact with anybody, right? We saw our district once a week, twice a week, once for zone conference, and once for district sacrament meeting on Sundays. And then we didn't really see anybody else in person. Like, people would come and drop off dinner, and we saw, the members that we were staying with, we would see them, obviously, because we lived in their house. And that was pretty much it. We didn't see anybody else. Everything else was over video call, was over chat, was over call. It was insane. And so we got very stir crazy very quickly, and like human contact was like just amazing. And so once a week the zone leaders would come and drop off mail. So they would go to the mission office and get any mail that we had, pick things up for us, that kind of thing, and bring it to us. And usually they would stop by, even if we didn't have mail, they would stop by and check how we were doing. And usually we would go to our church building because our members' house, they didn't have Wi-Fi at the house, and so we would go to the church building and do all of our Facebook proselytizing. And they would come and we'd stand outside and we would just talk to them for 20 minutes or so. And they would just ask how we were doing and share some funny stories and just kind of hype us up, and it was really nice. And there was one week they stopped by kind of out of the blue and they brought us ice cream. So random. They brought us ice cream and they had this is such a random detail of the story. They had one of those, birthday candles. You light it and then it like folds open like a flower, and it's just like 18 candles all lit at once, right? And it like spins and like plays songs, right? And it played Happy Birthday. It's so random. Anyway, I don't even know where they got it. And so they opened this thing, and then anyway, we were all giggling because he like put it on the ground because it was burning him, and then like it started petering out, but it kept playing Happy Birthday, but like really slowly and creepily. Anyway, it was just a heck of a time. Like, it was great. So we brought them inside and just like wash their hands because they had ice cream on their hands or something. I don't remember. Anyway, we had set up shop in, this is so much detail for this story, but anyway, the church building that we were going to at the time, we were in a YSA ward. And so the church building was also the institute building, and so they had this activities room, had like ping pong and stuff, and we had set up in that room because it had the comfy chairs. And it had ping pong. When we got really, really like brain rot, Facebook brain rot, we'd play ping pong. And we dragged a big rolling whiteboard in there, and that's where we had a lot of our schedule. It was so much easier for us to like, for one moment, just be off of our phones and write it down up on the whiteboard. And we'd gotten really bad at putting things into digital area book. And then, so the other thing you have to know is that as a missionary, you can't, so you're assigned to an area and you're put in on area book on this app on your phone. You have access to that area's schedule and contacts and everything like that, right? Investigators, members, everything. As a leader, so as a zone leader, as a district leader, as a sister training leader, as an AP, you can go into the area books of the people that you serve, the people that you're assigned to, the companionships that you're assigned to. As a sister training leader, I like never went in. I usually only went in to like check, like if I was going to go and surprise a sister, I would check to see if they had an appointment or something so we weren't interrupting or knew that they were going to be home, something like that. Anyway, so all that to say, with that background, right, they come inside, they wash their hands, and they came into our room, and they're like, yeah, this is our setup, this is where we've been chilling and like doing all of our work and all this stuff, and they stand there for a second, they're staring at the whiteboard, and we were like, what, and they were like, so, like, you do have stuff going on, like, you're actually, like, you have appointments and stuff, and we were like, oh, yeah, like, yeah, we've been doing pretty good. We've actually, our wards have been pretty good. We've had a lot of, appointments with members and all that stuff. And they looked at each other and they were like, yeah, we were looking through your area book the other day and we were really worried because like you didn't have anything in there. And we were like, oh yeah, sorry, like we've just been really terrible updating area book and it's just been really bad. Like we've been really bad at that. And they were like, no. We're not mad. We were worried because like we saw that your area book was empty and we know how hard it is as a missionary to not have anything to do and feel like you're failing. And so we wanted to check on you and make sure you were okay because of that. And I just stood there stunned. I was like, that, like they very easily could have been like, oh, they're not doing anything and come and like chewed us out, right, and said, why aren't you having anything in your area book? Why aren't you doing any lessons and meetings? And why aren't you doing comp study? And like all of this stuff. And instead, the first thing they thought of was that we were not going to be okay and that we were going to be struggling like mentally, motivation wise, like emotionally, all of that stuff. And they came to make sure we were okay. And I just, that's the first thing I think of when I think of leading with love. Because those amazing elders, that was what they went to first. They made sure that we were okay. And anyway, I've gotten very off topic. But like, that made me feel very cared for, right? They weren't just looking at my numbers and thinking, oh, they haven't had any lessons this week, how failures. They were making sure that physically, mentally, emotionally, that we were okay. And I think that's so, I don't know, it's so empowering, I guess is the word, right? Like, it's amazing. As she goes on, let's see if I can find this, where this quote is. Oh, here it is. It's down a little bit farther, but I'll read it now anyway. She says, "Love is the thing that changes hearts. It is the purest motive of all, and others can feel it." And I think we have this in our brains just as people in general, right? Not just in the church, but definitely shows up in the church, but also just in life, that the real motivator is like shame or feeling bad about yourself or fear, right? And certainly those can be motivators, right? When you're afraid of something, you do something. When you're afraid of something happening because you don't do something, you do something. When you're afraid of your reputation being tarnished, whatever, right? Like, fear is a motivator, but it doesn't last long term. And like, this is like scientifically studied. I don't have like studies to give you, but like, studies show that kindness and love is a more long-term motivator of change than fear and shame. Fear and shame can motivate you, will motivate you, but it won't last. You won't develop a habit because someone shamed you into doing something. If someone loves you into doing something, it's positive reinforcement, right? Like, that's literally a therapy technique proven because it works for a reason, right? You do it because it works. As we are positively reinforced, as we are positively, what's the word I'm looking for? As we are rewarded, that's the word. As we are rewarded with love and kindness and happiness, right? That creates pathways in our brain, and we want to stay in that because we feel good about ourselves and about other people. And so that's my question for you, is how can you motivate those around you with love? Because that's just, it's such a powerful motivator. It's so powerful. There's so much more in this talk that I could talk about, and it's mostly just like, it's that, right? It's our relationships are important. That's why we're on this earth, right? That we're not going to be perfect at it. We're not going to be the perfect parent or the perfect son or daughter or sibling or spouse or friend. But we can try and be good ones. And we can try, and that, in doing so, we're going to become more like our Savior. We are going to get a little bit better with every relationship that we have. And it's not our responsibility to make everybody's life better, right? But we can love them through whatever they're going through. Let's see if there's anything else I want to read. There's just so much that I could just read the whole thing. Just read the whole thing. I will read, as kind of a closing, I'll read this one last quote because it's so good. She says, "In earthly families, we're simply doing what God has done with us, pointing the way and hoping our loved ones will go in that direction. knowing the path they travel is theirs to choose. And when they pass to the other side of the veil and draw close to that loving gravitational pull of their heavenly home, I believe it will feel familiar because of how they were loved here. And of course, right, this is where I was talking about earlier, we're simply doing what God has done with us. We're pointing the way, and we know that the path that our loved ones travel is theirs to choose, right? We are doing our part in testifying and of loving and showing what has made us happy and how the gospel has changed our lives, and then trying to accept, that the choices of others are theirs, and they're gonna choose different things than us, and then that's okay. But we can still love them. They're still a vital role. They're still a vital role in our families and our lives. Okay, there's still so much that I could talk about, but I'll be here forever, and so just please read it and please see what stands out to you. It's such a beautiful talk, and there's so many little quotes and stories that she has, and check out the footnotes. She has a lot, talks and podcast episodes even, and books and things that she talks about, so check out those. And consider that question: how can you motivate those around you with love, whether that's kids or parents or spouses, or I don't know, if you're a coach or coworkers, maybe you're a manager and people that you manage. It truly does change people's lives. So that is all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for listening and or watching. As always, you can find me on Facebook or Instagram, General Conference Conversations. You can also subscribe on YouTube or follow wherever you find your podcasts. I love to hear from you. Messages, emails, comments, reviews, anything. I love to hear your comments and thoughts about things. And I will talk to you all next time.